Now I'm going to turn over the evening's talk to John Gunther. And John is the president of the Society of Architectural Historians for the St. Louis chapter and Missouri Valley chapters. And John will introduce to our speaker tonight. Thanks, John.
Thank you, Chris. It's a real pleasure and honor to introduce our friend and colleague, Bill Hart. SAH chapter member Bill Hart has been involved in historic preservation for many years. While in his 20s, he was already involved with a group called Market Preservation. This group advocated for saving several buildings that had been targeted for demolition along Market Street in downtown St. Louis for the proposed Gateway Mall project. Although demolition went forward almost 40 years ago with the Booter, Title Guarantee, and International buildings in the path of the mall, Bill remained steadfast in advocating for the preservation of Missouri's historic resources. He received his Bachelor of Science in Historic Preservation from Southeast Missouri State University and completed his graduate studies in architectural history at the Savannah College of Art and Design, where he won the Tau Sigma Delta Bronze Medal for excellence in architectural history. In 2008, he became the first ever field representative working for the Missouri Alliance for Historic Preservation, where he sought to foster a preservation ethic in small town Missouri and give voice to the underserved communities statewide. In 2014, he became the executive director of Missouri Preservation. Chartered in 1976 as the Missouri Heritage Trust, Missouri Preservation's mission is to preserve place and community for future generations of Missourians. To that end, Missouri Preservation, as one of its chief advocacy programs, announces an annual list of endangered historic places from throughout the state. Called its Places in Peril, these resources are nominated to the list by citizens across Missouri. The Places in Peril represent a variety of historic resource types threatened for any number of reasons, including lack of maintenance, lack of sufficient financial resources, inappropriate development, and imminent demolition. In his presentation tonight, Bill will discuss the 2019 Places in Peril, then show us the complete list of the nominations for 2020. In the coming week, a special committee will review these nominations and make their announcement later this fall. We hope that you'll tune in to that virtual announcement near the end of October. Details will be forthcoming on Missouri Preservation's website at www.preservemo.org. That's www.preservemo.org. And with that, let's welcome Bill Hart. Thank you, Bill.
Thank you, John. As John said, the Missouri Preservation, we were chartered as the Missouri Alliance for Historic Preservation back in 1976 to celebrate the nation's bicentennial. We decided to kind of showcase the architectural and historic treasures of Missouri by starting our own nonprofit advocacy organizations. We have for about 20 years, we have, excuse me, we've put on some sort of endangered historic places list. Begun as simply Missouri's most endangered historic places. In 2014, we changed the moniker to Missouri's Historic Places in Peril, a title that was kind of borrowed from the Georgia Trust for Historic Preservation. Most statewide do have an endangered list, and likewise, a lot of towns throughout Missouri, their historic preservation commissions have also recognized historic places in peril by an annual list. Begun pretty much as a media campaign, we have been blessed by a small grant that comes, a very generous grant actually, that comes from one of our members, an anonymous grant that helps us kind of move a lot of our historic resources from the endangered to the saved column, enabling us to attend nighttime meetings, helping us with expenses for travel and the like. And in one case, we're actually working on a nomination to the National Register of Historic Places to help save one of our historic places. When I started as Missouri's field representative back in 2008, one of my first calls was from a frantic little old lady who said that there were bulldozers at her country school where she grew up and went to school, and wondering what she could do. And of course, she could probably have started some kind of legal challenge to it, but you know, out in the boonies in Missouri, she wasn't a lawyer wasn't accessible, and you know, pretty much at that late stage in the game, all I could really suggest to her was to turn her head and look away. But in the meantime, we've started a group called our Local Liaisons to help us kind of try to get ahead of these emergency and emergent situations. We're often seen as preservation as the Johnny come lately to the game, you know, and we're suddenly angry because somebody's going to tear something down, and a lot of times it's already a done deal by the time we hear about it. So our Local Liaisons program has helped us identify a point person in many small towns and counties in Missouri, so that we can have our ear to the ground, and we can get ahead of a lot of these issues before they turn into dire circumstances. Without further ado, our statewide historic places in peril for 19. I do have to preface this talk with the fact that we were to announce our 2020 places in peril at this lecture. Because of COVID, we are pretty far behind. We haven't been able to actually meet in person for a lot of our events. Our announcement of our statewide historic places in peril usually takes place in late summer rather than fall, as you know, this being the first day of fall. We probably, as John said, will be announcing in the latter part of October this year. But to kind of soften that blow, I will kind of run through quickly at the end the list of nominees. These obviously have not been selected yet. There is a nonpartisan committee that decides how to distribute the places in peril with some kind of efficacy geographically, and of course keeping in mind how our list will help save important places that are in danger of imminent demolition for a number of reasons. The first, the Alta Vista Christian Church in Kansas City. The Mexican Institute Chapel was constructed in 1931 by the Mexican Christian Institute in Kansas City, whose congregation has served the area since 1917. Its mission was to serve as a site for worship, evangelization, and social relief for the Mexican railroad workers who labored in the historic West Bottoms and Armourdale districts of Kansas City, Missouri, and Kansas City, Kansas. The church is of Spanish Mission Revival design with an L-shaped floor plan and gabled roof finished with Spanish tile. A second wing was added to the building in 1945 to house classrooms. After 99 years of serving the community, the Alta Vista Christian Church congregation dissolved and donated the building to La Gloria de Dios, the glory of God, in 2016. The building continues to serve the Hispanic community today, although with a congregation of smaller numbers. Members have dedicated themselves to renovate and had planned to engage in wider community outreach when in December 2018, they discovered considerable structural issues. The south and east walls of the sanctuary were pulling away from one another. The church is in peril due to the impending repairs and financial burden to the congregation. It's important, as one of the first structures built for and by the Mexican American community, necessitates the structure's listing on our places in peril. While not in immediate danger of collapse, repairs are necessary. It is hoped by listing, a financial supporter can be identified and interesting parties come forward to provide technical assistance to complete the full structural and geotechnical assessments and partial stabilization that are needed at the church. Our second place in peril, the Capitol Avenue Historic District in Jefferson City, includes over 100 properties on 9 city blocks listed on the National Register of Historic Places near the state capitol in Jefferson City. On a significant east-west thoroughfare, there are good examples of Italianate, Queen Anne, Colonial, Gothic Revival, and French Second Empire styles, as well as more modern Spanish Revival, Craftsman, and Art Deco representatives. The buildings in the district continue to reflect development of the neighborhood from 1830 to 1945 and retain a high degree of integrity from its various periods of development. The district was listed on the National Register of Historic Places in 2005. It was estimated 5 years ago that over 25% of the Capitol Avenue Historic District consisted of derelict property, and the majority of these properties were owned by one individual who was neither willing to repair or to sell the buildings to owners interested in renovation. Long a concern to preservationists, the City Council adopted an ordinance declaring the entire district blighted, and the local housing authority developed a renewal plan which strives to renovate properties through voluntary repair, sales to new owners, and by seizure by eminent domain. In 2018, the City of Jefferson completed a major infrastructure improvement project on East Capitol Avenue. These attractive improvements in stark contrast with the continued blight in the neighborhood. In the past couple of years, they've made significant headway in obtaining some of these endangered properties via eminent domain. To add insult to injury, though, on May 22nd, 2019, an EF3 tornado tore through Jefferson City and up East Capitol Avenue. The community has already put forth an outstanding effort in repairing the damage, but there is still a long way to go. In at least one of the structures in the district, demolition had to be established because it was no longer stable. It is hoped that by relisting the entire Capitol Avenue Historic District on our Places in Peril, it will bring attention to the hard work already done by Historic City of Jefferson, but also aid them in raising funds so that they can provide improvement grants to the building owners in the district. The Carter County Courthouse in Van Buren, Missouri began as a post and beam building which was completed in October 1871. In 1936, the Works Progress Administration, or the WPA, funded a substantial addition to the east end of the building and added a cobblestone cladding to the entire structure, both old and new. Shortly after, a wall was built to enclose the square. This remains the only existing cobblestone courthouse in the state of Missouri. The courthouse served the community from 1871 until 2017, when it was damaged by unprecedented flooding of the nearby Current River. Although the building is empty, the Carter County Courthouse still remains the center of the community where locals gather for Christmas tree lightings, Easter egg hunts, and the annual Festival of Lights. However, the building is still in imminent danger of deterioration. Aside from interior wall coverings being removed on the first floor to promote drying, no work has been done since the flooding in 2017. Damaged doors and windows have made it difficult to keep out animals and pests, and when the county government vacated the building permanently, it pledged to maintain the building, though no plans for its future use or renovation have been articulated. In 2019, the county approved the creation of the Courthouse Renovation Committee, a citizens group with the goal of creating a nonprofit which will partner with the county to oversee the plans for renovation and reuse. While support for retaining the courthouse is unanimous among the community, the nominator hopes being listed on Missouri's Places in Peril will serve as an objective validation of the structure's significance and elicit support from those willing to offer professional or financial assistance in the renovation efforts. This is the de Hodiamont House in St. Louis. Built as a farmhouse in 1829 by Baron Emmanuel de Hodiamont, a Belgian Trappist monk who came to St. Louis in 1803. In 1875, the exterior of the house was altered to the current Gothic Revival style it retains today, but the overall footprint of the thick stone walls, center hall plan has not changed. In 1906, a brick room was added to the rear, but since then, no major alterations have occurred. It is one of the earliest known houses in the city of St. Louis and is a rare example of the early Gothic Revival style, both factors earning its city landmark status in 1972. Currently, the de Hodiamont house is suffering by demolition by neglect, and although it has an owner, no work has been done to significantly improve or take care of the property in several years. With the community around the house improving, the nominator hopes this listing will either encourage the owner to take care of the property or find a client for whom to renovate the house or sell it. The Emmaus Homes in Marthasville is a complex that began as a seminary for the German Evangelical Church in Missouri. A campus of 5 buildings was completed here by 1859. 4 of these remain in various states of repair, those being the farmhouse, the bake oven, the Friedensboot or Messenger of Peace publishing house, and the dormitory. The seminary was in operation at this site until 1883, when it moved to Wellston in St. Louis County and eventually became Eden Seminary in Clayton, Missouri. In 1893, the campus in Marthasville became known as the Emmaus Asylum for Epileptics and Feeble-Minded. The campus grew to a total of 8 substantial buildings, including a chapel by 1928. In more recent years, the religious denomination became the United Church of Christ, and the 2 campuses the church body owned, this one in Warren County for men and the other in St. Charles County for women, became simply known as the Emmaus Homes. It is an important historic site, having been constructed by some of the tens of thousands of Germans who emigrated here during the 1830s. In the area, the first evangelical church west of the Mississippi was constructed, and this marked the beginnings of the Synod of the West, known as Der Deutsche Evangelische Kirchenverein den Westens. The building and the complex are unique in that they are of sturdy limestone construction in various German styles by German immigrants. They are representative of the tenacity of some of Missouri's earliest Germans and are unique in that most are original with very few modifications over the years. Through the years, the approach toward caring for the handicapped and developmentally disabled has also changed, and care for the residents at Emmaus has shifted from large institutional settings to smaller group homes. Emmaus has listed the campus for sale, and it is hoped that a listing on the Places in Peril will bring it to the attention of a preservation-minded developer. The village of Galloway, the former village of Galloway, incorporated into the city of Springfield now, prospered as a place along the US 60, US 65 highway system, but also a company town with the location of the Frisco Railroad and the Ash Grove White Lime Works. Several of the buildings employ the use of local Ozark fieldstone. Threatened by inappropriate development in Springfield, it is hoped that this will get the City Council's attention and guide preservation-friendly development for Galloway's future. The Hall of Waters. Excelsior Springs was a premier railroad spa vacation destination in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Several natural springs were discovered here and vacationers flocked here to take the waters for their salubrious qualities. Completed in 1934 as PWA project number 5252, the Hall of Waters project was considered one of the best outfitted health resorts in the region. This building contains a swimming pool, hydrotherapy rooms, and what is purportedly the longest bar in the world, exclusively serving water. The city designed designed in Mayan Art Deco style, the building is still used for city offices, but deferred maintenance has left rusting ductwork, racked floors, a leaky roof, and listing here is hoped to help raise awareness of the building's condition and help identify potential investors and funds to help preservation funds at the Hall of Waters. The Holloway House in Rolla, Missouri, was once part of a 250-acre cattle farm owned and operated by Colonel George Holloway. An entrepreneur, philanthropist, and real estate magnate, Holloway would shape the growth of Rolla when he resided at this house. Constructed circa 1900 for Benjamin Knapp, the house and property were purchased by Holloway in 1902. Holloway expanded the farming operation and christened it the Elm Row Stock Farm. By 1907, Holloway sold the ranch but reserved the eastern 40 acres below the house and subdivided the land into house lots. The new subdivision became known as the Holloway Addition and was one of the finest neighborhoods in Rolla. Today, the Holloway House is the centerpiece of the 100-acre Bearwan Park, named in honor of former Holloway House owners Bert and Juanita Williams. The house is currently endangered as the city wants to demolish the home to make way for a senior center. The Rolla Preservation Alliance recently posted a poll in which 70% of the 421 voters who participated responded in favor of keeping the house. It is hoped that this listing will make the city of Rolla aware of other preservation and adaptive reuse efforts across the state so that city government could apply a similar preservation principle at the Holloway House. Excuse me. Here we have one of our first categorical nominations, the Katz Drug Stores in Kansas City and Springfield. Excuse me. Katz Drug Company was founded in 1914 by newspaper and fruit stand owners Mike and Isaac Katz. The first 2 stores were located in Kansas City, and over 57 years, the business branched out to a total of 65 stores in 5 states. The store at Main and Westport that you see on the left was built in 1934. It was the first outside of the central business district and the first to feature the designs of Clarence Kivett, who would become chief architect of the chain. In 1961, Kivett, Myers, and McCallum were tasked with designing the company's largest location, Springfield store number 46, Katz City on the right. Both locations reflect the fashionable styles of the period in which they were built. The Main and Westport store incorporating both Art Deco and Art Moderne styles, and Katz City featuring the avant-garde Googie style popular in the 1960s. Vacancy was not an issue at these buildings until the past decade. Springfield store number 46 was occupied by CVS until the chain closed the store in April of 2019. The building is now advertised for lease, and there are concerns that it will be demolished or inappropriately developed. The Springfield Landmarks Board recently voted unanimously to nominate Katz City a city historic site, but the nomination was denied by the Springfield City Council due to lack of comments from the owner, even though Springfield City Ordinance does not require approval of the owner for designation as a historic site. While the Main and Westport store in Kansas City has had various tenants over the years, the most recent owner, Redeemer Fellowship, purchased the building at auction. The church has made the decision to sell the property, preparing the building for redevelopment as it is in the proposed streetcar extension, now a highly sought after corridor by real estate developers. Nominators of both of these properties hope that by including them in our Places in Peril, will bring them to the attention of preservation-friendly buyers who would bring the buildings back to their original, unique, and iconic glory instead of altering their historic appearances or demolishing them for new construction, and bringing attention to the rapid dwindling stock of work by the local modern architects, Kivett and Myers. Another categorical nomination, LRA buildings in the city of St. Louis. The Land Reutilization Authority, known as LRA in the city of St. Louis, owns over 11,200 parcels of property. LR estimates that there are approximately 6,200 buildings on these various properties, both commercial and residential, constructed between 1870 and 1950. Many are located in local or national register historic districts, and even more, if surveyed, might be determined eligible for historic district listing. Most of the LRA's holdings are located in distressed neighborhoods due to the large number of tax foreclosures, so it is possible that LRA will end up owning more potentially historic buildings in the future. LRA's major policy of disposition of their buildings each year has been ad hoc demolition, presenting a major threat to preservation of the vernacular architecture of St. Louis. The St. Louis Metropolitan Sewer District, or MSD, is currently in its 3rd year of funding the demolition of LRA-owned buildings in North St. Louis, where the district is spending a planned $13.6 million per year over 20 years to demolish 1,300 vacant buildings, creating passive stormwater retention spaces in place of buildings. In South and Central St. Louis, MSD plans to separate stormwater from city sewers, but in North St. Louis has chosen the cheaper route of simply creating storm permeable land by removing the buildings. Furthermore, the city of St. Louis increased its annual demolition funding through a ballot initiative, spending about $1 million annually on building demolitions. 2 recent efforts to combat demolition-only policies have recently been passed. One calls for selling vacant houses for $1 to citizens who would make one of these buildings their private residence for 5 years. A current court decision also allows the city to issue $6 million in bonds each year to fund stabilization for weatherproofing of historic and vacant buildings held by the LRA, representing the first ever stream of funding for protection rather than demolition of these buildings. With the guaranteed prospect of increased urbanization in our nation and in our state, extant buildings show far more potential for contributing to the economy and quality of life than vacant land. Unimproved property values are low, while improved property with buildings yield the highest promise of tax revenue. Currently, LRA lacks the funds to market for sale properties, but the promotion of dollar houses and stabilization efforts are great preservation tools. It is hoped that this listing will amplify the cause for further change and also announce to preservationists the need for citizens to step up and purchase LRA buildings. Never before have there been these tools to aid with the preservation and counteract demolition policies, and now is the time for people to take advantage of them before we lose thousands of great buildings in St. Louis. Also in St. Louis, the Sarah Lou Cafe, constructed in 1906, it's situated at the corner of Sarah and St. Louis Avenues in the Greaterville neighborhood in the city of St. Louis. The building is one of 4 2-story corner mixed-use buildings at this intersection and represents the only one of 4 that is currently vacant. Owned by the Land Revitalization Authority, a state city governmental agency, as we discussed, the nonprofit group Northside Community Housing Incorporated has just renewed a 1-year option to purchase. Generally, the facade of the building is in good condition. It has a terracotta roof and bay windows overlooking the streetscape. Interior floors are solid and could be retained and refinished. Like many other properties of this caliber that have sat vacant, it has been stripped of copper, plumbing, and most other items that might be sold for scrap. While the building's interior is in generally good condition, the exterior is in dire need of stabilization due to unboarded windows and deteriorating masonry walls. The Ville neighborhood is representative of the resilience of African Americans in St. Louis to thrive and prosper in an age that was marked by racism and exclusion. In spite of adversity, the neighborhood has a rich history of African American education, business, and art. The cafe building is a historically significant landmark, a gathering spot for family restaurant in North St. Louis for many years. Its loss would represent a loss of urban fabric, density, and the rich history of this African American neighborhood. By listing on Missouri's Historic Places in Peril, it's hoped that Northside Community Housing will garner further visibility and credibility in its case for support and will help raise the philanthropic dollars needed to rehabilitate this local landmark. The Second Baptist Church, also in St. Louis, is an imposing building at 500 North Kings Highway in the city of St. Louis and constructed in 1907, designed by the prominent local architectural firm of Moran, Russell, and Garden, a firm that was successor once removed from the office of famed H.H. Richardson. Described as a tour de force of brickwork, this structure includes Missouri red granite, multicolored brick, terracotta trim, Minnesota yellow sandstone, and red roof tiles. This building is located in the Holy Corners National Register Historic District, made up of several churches and synagogues, and recognized as significant at the statewide level. The district was designated an official landmark by the city of St. Louis in 1974. The Second Baptist Church is a poster child for a problem common to historic structures everywhere: demolition by neglect. Having been neglected by its previous owners and through a carelessness on behalf of the owner who purchased the property in 2012, this property has suffered large losses through theft and vandalism. Critical building components that have disappeared over the years include, but are not limited to, copper gutters, decorative collection boxes and downspouts. Stained glass windows have been stolen or broken. The campanile roof system is failing and copper ventilation louvers have been stolen from the tower. Decorative iron strapping and decorative hardware from the front doors have also been stolen. The current owner presented a restoration plan to the neighborhood seven years ago, but no moves have been made to advance on the project. It is hoped that by listing as a place in peril, the building's owner will either A, finally address the deteriorating conditions, or B, sell it to a person or entity that will take the necessary actions to preserve, restore, and return the property to productive use. The Shanley building in Clayton, Missouri was built in 1935 and was the first international style building in St. Louis and the central Midwest. Commissioned by orthodontist Leo M. Shanley and designed by St. Louis architect Harris Armstrong, the Shanley building received wide recognition within the first few years of its construction, including a silver medal at the International Exposition of Art and Technology in Paris in 1937. It is now listed on the National Register of Historic Places. After 80 years, the Shanley building has been at risk due to the proposed development of a condominium tower and high-rise hotel. The nominators originally hoped that this Shanley building would encourage the owners and developers to preserve the building and incorporate it into their design plans for the site. We are happy to report that that seems to have recently happened, as developers Steve Brown at Balke Brown have floated the idea of incorporating the Shanley into future plans for an apartment building, first floor offices in the Shanley building, a conference room, and a coffee bar at the corner of Bemiston and Maryland Avenues in St. Louis. A great happy ending story for that building already. Westland Acres, which straddles Wildwood and Chesterfield, Missouri in West St. Louis County, is a residential subdivision of approximately 130 acres on the border of these two villages. It contains a handful of 2- and 3-bedroom wood frame homes tucked into the woods along Church Road and is anchored on the western edge of the subdivision by the Union Baptist Church, which was constructed in 1984 after the old church building burned. In the churchyard is the John West Cemetery, formerly known as the West Gumbo Cemetery. The cemetery contains about 30 graves dating from as early as the 1870s. Westland was established in 1881 when William West and his wife Polly, who were recently freed slaves from across the river in the Daniel Boone settlement, were able to purchase 150 acres from Norris Long on what was then a remote area in St. Louis County. There, the West family built a log cabin and established what would become the community of Westland. The property was eventually divided among descendants of its original family, and by 1950, there were 45 families living in the neighborhood along what was still a dirt road. Many of the families still farmed and lived off the land. The community has now dwindled to under 10 families, although Westland retains its historic ties with descendants of William West. Decades ago, there existed many African-American enclaves throughout St. Louis County, but these have become rarities as their communities, often marginalized, were frequently the first to face the wrecking ball. Westland Acres is today threatened by encroachment of high-priced development. The surrounding area has been transformed from rural backwater to one of St. Louis's wealthiest areas. This development has caused property values to skyrocket, and along with it, the property taxes. These burgeoning tax bills are driving residents out of their ancestral homes and to more affordable areas of the region. It is hoped that by listing here, perhaps the residents of Westland Acres might get some sort of tax release from St. Louis County so that they'll be able to afford to stay in the historic community, which has been their ancestral home for nearly 150 years. And then, our surprise, our places in peril for 2020 are nominations. As John said, next week we will rank the nominations and decide which of these which of these lucky ramshackle places will be put on our 2020 list of places in peril. The first is 1219 South Main Street in St. Charles, locally designated a historic property built in 1834 of locally quarried limestone. This was a local winery and restaurant for over 100 years and suffers by demolition by neglect. The developer would like to remove the buildings and the wine cellar to produce a high-density apartment complex. The second, 1425 North 2nd Street in St. Charles, is a locally designated historic property known historically as the Short Boarding House. This is a contributing resource in the Frenchtown National Register Historic District. Listing would help convince the owner to sell or rehabilitate. This a true treasure. I don't know if anybody's ever been to Bay. Constructed in the 1850s. This is in Gasconade County. The tiny village of Bay is about 3 miles north of US Highway 50. The house and the mercantile buildings also included the town's post office with its walk-up window and post office boxes still in place. The buildings are fine examples of German vernacular stone buildings and are recorded in Charles Van Ravensway's The Art and Architecture of German Settlements in Missouri. The owner had been commuting back and forth to his home in the Northeast of the United States in the summers to restore this beautiful place, but he unfortunately died in 2017 while undergoing heart surgery. We are hoping that the nonprofit established can seek funds for restoration, or the current owner, the family's trust, would be willing to sell to a new owner with protective covenants. The Bureau of Mines building in Rolla, constructed in 1946 and 1947 by designs by architect Henry Hopkins of Baltimore, Maryland, the headquarters building for the Rolla division of the Bureau of Mines. After a fire in 1948, the building was rebuilt to its current appearance on what is now the campus of the University of Science and Technology. It was listed on the National Register of Historic Places in 2017 for its significance in the areas of science and industry. Of its original 6 Bureau of Mines buildings, half of them were lost in 2017. The University of Missouri University of Science and Technology has a long history of historic building demolition in the city of Rolla. It is hoped that this listing would bring awareness to the general public to build advocacy for retention and adaptive reuse of historic buildings within the downtown and this Bureau of Mines structure. Next is the Curry House, which is located in Normandy in St. Louis County. Constructed in 1891 by John Melanthe Cates from a prominent St. Louis family. Locally designated a historic landmark, the 2.5-story shingle-style home is owned by the local school district. Successful community functions take place in and around the building with an extensive community garden located adjacent to the house. Deferred maintenance and lack of funds threaten the continued existence of this house. This is the Village of Galloway, renominated, which you heard about. I'll spare you more details, but it gives you a few more photographs of the historic resources within the Village of Galloway, which is now part of the city of Springfield. The Hardy House, this is the Hardy House in Ava, one of a rare number of substantial houses in Ava, Missouri, and built by a prominent local historic family. The building's owners are currently willing to sell or explore financial incentives that they might use in order to restore this house. The next is the Carpelese Manuscript Building in St. Louis at 3524 Russell Boulevard. The Carpelese, located in the Compton Heights Historic District, it was designed by prominent local architect Albert B. Groves and opened in 1911 as the Third Church of Christ Scientists. The Carpelese Manuscript Collection opened at a location here in 2015. In March 2019, a 4-alarm fire engulfed the building, causing considerable damage to the museum. St. Louis Building Commissioner Frank Oswald proclaimed that the building is structurally sound, but in the meantime, huge openings in the roof have allowed for further deterioration of the building's interior. It is hoped the listing will increase awareness and hopefully encourage the owner to repair or transfer to a new preservation-minded owner. This nomination is for the wall surrounding the historic Missouri State Penitentiary in Jefferson City. The wall was completed by the penitentiary's opening in 1836 and had some structural problems, which added to its partial demise by the May 2019 tornado that hit central Jefferson City. This again along the Capitol Avenue corridor. Although closed, the penitentiary has become a major tourist attraction for Jefferson City. Since the wall was an integral part of the prison complex, it is hoped that by listing here that serious consideration will be given to rebuilding the wall instead of quietly sweeping it away. The Moberly Junior High School in Moberly in Randolph County was constructed in 1895 and substantially altered to its current Art Deco appearance after a 1929 fire. The building was no longer in use by the school district and was closed by 1997. It was placed on the National Register of Historic Places in 2008 in hopes that the listing might make redevelopment easier through the use of historic tax credits. One developer was looking at rehabilitation, combining these credits with low-income housing credits, which unfortunately never materialized. It is hoped that listing here will help the city to market this property to yet a new developer. We have no details on this, but I did want to include a photo of Old Main, the Missouri State Hospital on Arsenal Street in St. Louis. The old Phillips 66 station in Greenfield in Dade County was nominated by its owner. This vintage gas station has served the community as a filling station, restaurant, nail salon, and as headquarters for the Greenfield Chamber of Commerce. Deferred maintenance has caused significant deterioration to the roof. Its elderly owner would like to help to restore, including financial and technical assistance. The St. Augustine project in St. Louis, built in 1896 with adjacent rectory constructed in 1928. This was originally St. Augustine's Roman Catholic Church, which served as a swelling tide of German immigrants to St. Louis at Hebert and Lismore Streets on the north side. Starting in the 1970s, the north side was victim to urban blight, disinvestment, and a flight to the suburbs. The Catholic Church closed in 1982. After a couple of other urban churches came and went, the building was left vacant for several years, in which the roof experienced a collapse and much vandalism and theft occurred. Currently owned by a federally tax-exempt nonprofit, it is hoped that listing here will help them raise funds as the building is in dire need for immediate stabilization. This also lacks some supportive information, but is the Shiloh Church in Everton, surrounded by the church cemetery. It's an early Gothic revival style building in Dade County. This is the Spurlock House in Ava, which is in Douglas County, Missouri. Constructed by the locally prominent Spurlock family, this house sits just off the town square in Ava and is a fine example of stone and rock-faced houses constructed here in the 1930s and 40s. It has suffered from neglect for several years and was purchased by a new owner who has promised to rehabilitate and sell. It is hoped listing here will encourage the owner to work expeditiously to renovate the house according to historic standards in order to preserve this important type of Ozark vernacular building. The Stonner Meat Market in Chamois, Osage County. One of the oldest buildings in Chamois, circa 1880. This former meat market building was operated by the Stonner family from 1888 until 1984, nearly 100 years. While once considered by the Chamois Industrial Development Corporation for the location of a community center that never came to fruition, the building has been left vacant and unmaintained for several years. It's hoped that by listing, it will help the local IDC and the local Historic Preservation Commission raise funds to renovate the building for use as a local cultural center in Chamois. And finally, the Olivia Apartments in Joplin. listed both as a local landmark and on the National Register of Historic Places. The Olivia Apartments were constructed in 1906 and represent the highest quality in design and accoutrements in Joplin at the time. Nominated to the National Register for their distinctive architecture, having been designed by local architect Austin Allen, the building featured Joplin's top restaurants located on the 5th floor. The building has long suffered from deferred maintenance, and the building was condemned for occupancy in 2006. There have been several owners since, all promising to renovate this landmark building with no tangible result. The current owner is willing to sell, and it is hoped that listing will garner interest from a new developer willing to take on this project in one of Joplin's most distinctive buildings. So in closing, in case you have other questions or looking for more information, there is this synopsis of our Places in Peril on our website at preservemo.org. It'll tell you about some of our other programs, including our 3-day educational conference and our statewide historic preservation honor awards. And I offer you our office telephone number and my email if you have more questions. I want to thank the St. Louis Public Library, especially Chris Impastato and Christine La Barbera, and to the Society of Architectural Historians for hosting this, especially John Gunther, its president. I thank you all very much for your attention, and now welcome any questions that the audience might have.
Bill, there was one, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, there was one question I think Michael Kelly asked. He said, I think the picture of the Hardy House was flipped with the Curry House.
And I think you probably are right.
Okay, awesome. And David Brown would like to know, is the
Yes.
Hodiamont house occupied?
The de Hodiamont house is vacant and boarded. And if he would like information, I do have contact information for the owner if he might be interested in having the developer do a renovation for him or purchasing it from the developer who currently owns it.
Okay. So they can reach you at director at
preservemo.org. Yes, ma'am.
Right. Awesome.
I have a question.
Yes.
Sure. Go ahead, Brenda.
Excuse me. First of all, this was really fascinating. I've lived in St. Louis for about 20 some years and had no idea about some of these really sad things that have happened, especially what really struck me was the fact that the Metropolitan Sewer District is striving to, that just really, that's so messed up. I can't even get over that. But
it's a very sad solution. But the MSD is charged with diverting stormwater away from our sewer system. Many of our older buildings, the drainage from our, as a matter of fact, I live in a historic building in St. Louis myself, and the stormwater from my 1906 building has traditionally emptied directly into the sewer from the storm gutters through the downspout and directly into St. Louis sewers, where it again it's already clean water and it has to be mingled with sewage and then cleaned again. So while we certainly understand their need to deal with stormwater runoff, it certainly represents the sad demise of potentially thousands of historic buildings in St. Louis.
Yeah. Thank you so very much for this presentation. I'm definitely going to go to your website, and also I'm interested in the society as well. Do you have to be an architect to be a member of that society?
I'll let John can probably answer that better than I, but no, I belong to the SAH, and there are people from all walks of life that come to their annual meeting, and it's really a fun time, Brenda. You can bring a slide of your favorite historic building and present it to the audience at the annual meeting. It's really a lot of fun. And definitely come to our website. We are a poor nonprofit too, and we welcome welcome you to become members and active participants in the preservation of Missouri's shared historic resources by becoming a member.
Absolutely.
Yes,
Thank you so
yes.
much.
Thank you.
Please do join the Society of Architectural Historians. We'd love to have you. Thank you.
We have a couple more questions, Bill. Tracy wants to know, does the DAR or any other group participate in any of your projects?
Actually, one of our honor awards, as I said, one of our other big program advocacy programs is our statewide preservation honor awards. And we actually honored the DAR, the Daughters of the American Revolution, 2 years ago with one of our highest awards, the McReynolds Award, for their ongoing efforts in Missouri. They haven't participated with us in one of the endangered projects, although that's a really good idea, and I may reach out to them in the future. I have the utmost respect and gratitude for the DAR, who's been doing historic preservation since there was really a historic preservation. They were marking historic roadways and buildings back in at the turn of the century already, before there really materialized an official preservation movement nationwide and in Missouri, likewise throughout the states. So we really appreciate what they've done to preserve the history and culture of Missouri.
Wonderful. And Patrice has listed in our chat, put a comment. She's aloha from Hawaii. What is the state doing with historic tax credits? In the past, they were often in danger. And she said, I used my restoration on Belle Reve Boulevard.
Oh, thanks, Patrice. Actually, the program, though some ideologues in the state legislature have sought to get rid of the tax credits, seeking it as a big tax giveaway, the historic preservation tax credit remains probably the largest contributor to the economic salvation and stability of historic buildings in Missouri. There have been nearly $8 billion invested just through this program of the Department of Economic Development. Some of the activities and features of the credit have been curtailed in recent years, especially the larger projects where it used to be non-political and you could apply for the credits and get them, in a very non-political kind of way. You now must prove the efficacy and the worthiness of your project to a panel before it actually gets accepted. That again is for the larger projects. But luckily for small town Missouri and homeowners, particularly, any project that is below $250,000 in qualified rehabilitation expenses is exempt from the cap. So there is a cap. I believe it's 86 million now that can be allotted in tax credits each year. But if your project, again, is below $250,000 in investment, you are exempt from those restrictions.
Does anyone have any other questions? I'm not seeing anything else on the chat, but if someone wants to type something in, that'd be great.
I do want to, while we're waiting, if anybody does want to ask a question, I will chime in that especially in my own neighborhood, before I came to work for Missouri Preservation, I did small development projects as a small developer and general contractor, and I pretty much exclusively used those tax credits where, part of my mission was to help stabilize and save neighborhoods and save buildings and neighborhoods. So it really helped me because I targeted iffy places to do my development. And a lot of times the tax credit helped me, if anything, keep from losing money where, in a neighborhood where the housing market might not be on par with other places in the metropolitan area. And it also created a ripple effect. The monkey see, monkey do, and some people, I'm sure, had no idea that I was using the tax credit, but because I was and able to use it, I encouraged other people to do renovations. One of my house that I live in was a tax credit project. And people, of course, told me I was crazy for investing in the building where I am. But within a couple of years after my renovation, there were at least 5 rehabs going on in my neighborhood of historic buildings within a block of my house. And then soon after, new construction started appearing on the vacant lots. So it really did help to serve as a shot in the arm to the economy of my own neighborhood.
And I would add, Bill, St. Louis was the beneficiary of that tax credit program as well. We had, I think at one point in time, the greatest beneficiary in the whole country of that program. And St. Louis Union Station certainly was a great project that came out of that as well.
So many of our buildings, the arcade building downtown, just you name it, any historic building, the old post office, you know, just one after the other building were saved because of that tax credit. And as a matter of fact, I think there are 34 tax credit programs in various states throughout the country now. And almost every one of those states will tell you that they modeled their program after Missouri's. It was I have to tell you here and give him his props, local lawyer Jerry Schlichter was responsible for writing the tax credit law. And this is a man who has not used $1 of the tax credits. He's done this completely for the betterment of his state and his community, and now obviously for many more states throughout the United States.
So we had another question come in from Deb, and she said, in St. Louis County, does the county have any control over preservation, or does it reside within the individual cities, Kirkwood, for example?
The St. Louis County does have a Historic Buildings Commission. There is no, in some communities, there are preservation laws. A lot of times people think that federal preservation laws are probably the toughest because they're the big, heinous federal government. But to the contrary, the most restrictive laws are ones that are made up in communities, by communities. And that's because you can tailor that legislation to your own desires. A big problem with the Shanley building that we were talking about in Clayton is that there is no preservation ordinance in Clayton. So there was no Historic Preservation Commission to rule on whether they thought it appropriate or not for the Shanley building to be demolished for new construction. So to Deb, I would say, yeah, there is a County Historic Buildings Commission. I encourage you to find them online at the county's website. But if she's interested in preservation activities in her own community, I'd suggest teaming up with one of the commissioners or the alderman in her local community in order to establish a preservation ordinance. And that ordinance recognizes historic buildings and places and resources, but it also requires the formation of a Historic Preservation Commission, which decides on the appropriateness of alterations to historic buildings, and many times on the demolition of historic buildings that have been recognized by that very ordinance. Anyone else?
Anyone else? Yeah.
Well, it looks like we finished early. I know I kind of raced through my my presentation, but I invite you to check our website, preservemo.org. If you send me, I won't force you to become a member, but I will if you send me your snail mail address and your email address. I will put you in our list of contacts so that we keep in touch with you with every missive and every news item that we have. We also are very active on social media at Missouri Preservation. We have a Facebook page, Missouri Preservation, called Missouri Preservation. That's very popular, and we're on Instagram and we're on Twitter, so that you can also follow us there.
Well, Bill, thank you so much. And thank you for the wonderful work you're doing on behalf of all of us. I know we really appreciate your dedicated efforts in the preservation of these wonderful landmarks you've shared with us tonight. So from all of us, thank you so much for a great talk, and more importantly, for all you're doing.
Thank you so much. We wouldn't be able to do any of it without the support of our community and our members. So I appreciate you too. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you,
And-
Bill. And I wanted to let you know our next meeting will be October 27th on Tuesday evening. And Esley Hamilton, our former preservation historian at St. Louis County Parks, will be discussing Christopher Wren's St. Mary Aldermanbury, a masterwork of English Baroque in Fulton, Missouri. So there'll be information on the St. Louis Public Library website for registration, and we'll be getting information out on social media. Thank you everyone for a wonderful evening. Thank you, Bill. Thank you, John. And we look forward to seeing you next month.
Thank you.
Good night,
Thanks, John.
everyone.
Good
Night,
night.
John.